Hey guys, welcome to the Elite Coaching Podcast, episode 14. We are going to be running through birth control considerations for coaching female clients, joined as always with my senior coach, Diarmuid. How are you, bud?
I'm great, man. All good, all good. How about yourself?
Yeah, good. Very, very good. Have you, because we're doing this on a weekly basis now, we can almost do like weekly catch-ups at the start. How has your week been?
My week has been the exact same as all my other weeks, which is pretty okay, if I'm honest. I don't feel like very much changes at all. Like even when I do have access to a gym and stuff, or when I do have access to a social life, let's say that I never have anyway. But yeah, nothing has really changed, to be completely honest. I'm kind of happy out in my little coaching bubble.
That's good, man. That's good.
How about yourself?
Do you know what? This was a very, very good week in camp. Training has gone very well. Everything from a coaching aspect went very well. We're kind of just about wrapping up now, like a very heavy run of prep clients who we're just about kind of finishing off. So we have, probably 5 left, I think. And then we're kind of closing a door on it, and then obviously we're starting up again in May. But I know, I mean, you were kind of talking off air, which kind of would be a nice little kind of thing to maybe start this off with. But allowing the next run of prep clients to kind of only kick off that prep when we have access to gyms. Because obviously, in the last run, 80% of them prepped without having a gym to train from. And it was mentally very difficult for them to have to go through that without having the gym there. It was just a tough process for them. And you know what? I feel for them. You know, I'm obviously on prep at the moment. Now, long way away, not until end of August. But when I'm looking at even the setup I'm training in now, I'm training in a gym, but it's not like a fully kitted out gym. And even at times, I find it tough. So I can imagine what they had to go through the last run of their prep, having to train from home. I'd imagine it was pretty tough. So I'm kind of looking forward to kind of closing the chapter on this one, kind of finalizing the last couple of guys that we have now over the next kind of couple of weeks. And then we kind of kick off and we go again. We get ready to launch again. We'll probably have a 2 or 3 day break and then we'll be straight back in again.
Yeah, I can't imagine it being a enjoyable process. Prepping from home. Yeah.
And look, I know it's a very superficial thing to say, but being able to train in a gym environment, especially with male or female, when you're that lean, it's a nice feeling. It's a nice feeling being in that environment when you're that close to your shoot or a show. And I can't stress that enough for people. And the fact that they've missed out on that, do you know what? A part of me really feels for them. And I say to myself, do you know what? Like, full credit to you guys for going through that. But then also another part of me is I'm just so excited for the next run of people to be able to experience it. But man, credit where credit's due for those people. And some of them got peeled training from home as well, which that is a different. We've been there. It's hard to go through that. And the fact that they've done it, man, I can give nothing but credit to them. But other than that, everything else has gone fantastic as always.
But if anything, is that not like, it shows it can be done. Like it shows that, like, yeah, there's people prepping from home. Never mind the little, like a fat loss phase. Like, it can be done, and not having access to a gym can't be a limiting factor.
No. And I think for them, and you know, this is something that I say to every single one of my clients, your prep is a story. Your journey is a story. And at times, I think coaches, we do take that for granted, the fact that we only know the story. Like myself and yourself, we've coached so many people, and at times people just see the before and after. They don't see what's happened in between. And I think it's special as a coach to be able to experience that with so many people. But I keep saying to them, this is just a part of your story. And those struggles that happened in between, they are a part, but it makes you a very, very relatable person, because you have gone through something. So many people would have just stopped. You know, so many people would have just failed and they would have just dropped out, or they wouldn't have been able to do it. But it kind of, opens up another avenue of relatability to kind of put into any aspect in life, really. When you're met with a situation that's completely off course, you just have to stick by your guns. And if you set a goal, you have to just massively push towards achieving that goal. I think it's taught them more life lessons, I think, than just getting peeled for a photo shoot.
Yeah, just on one of the things that you touched on there, just for any coaches, so you touch on having some sort of empathy, of understanding what somebody else is going through, basically, and that is, again, it's a different field, but it's definitely relatable.
Yeah.
Where if you take two groups of people and you pair them with counselors, the people that have an empathetic counselor will be more successful than if you send another group home with a counseling book. Let me explain that again. Okay, so we have 3 groups here. One group has an empathetic counselor. One group is sent home with a book, and the other has just a normal counselor. The people who do the best are the people with the book and the people with the empathetic counselor. So like that in itself, like if you can learn empathy, which you actually can, like it comes with practicing listening and stuff, but if you can learn empathy, it is one of the probably the best traits that I've gained as a coach that I didn't have going in, that you can't study for.
Yeah,
you can practice it, but it's one of the most important things as a coach, is being able to turn around and be like, hey, yeah, I get that. I understand. I understand that I don't understand as well. So like your situation is completely yours, but we're okay. Let's work on. Let's work through it anyway.
Do you think that a lot of junior coaches may not understand that, to the fact of maybe they've either not been there themselves or they've never been coached? Because I think you're probably going to learn it from many different avenues, but you may pick it up from, let's say, being coached by someone who has that trait of a coach, of being empathetic.
Yeah, I agree. So I know, Brian O'Higgins.
Yeah.
Phenomenal coach. I worked with him for a while. He didn't even look at my nutrition or anything. It was just purely for just a bit of a mentorship, basically. Yeah. And this is why he would have kind of like introduced me to like motivational interviewing and stuff like that. Yeah, it's absolutely massive. Like to be in a position where, and this is something that I know, like that we do quite well and we're quite conscious of, is like, if you are a client who feels like you are the only client that this coach is working with, can leave you in a feeling hard and ready to work with the coach in changing, I suppose.
Big time. And it's probably at times that we don't hear that. Like it's funny you said that. When I went to Avian's very first photo shoot, Avian said that to me. It's funny you said that. She actually came to me and said to me, look, Adam, the reason why I feel I've actually done so well is you made me feel like I am your only client. And I think at the time then, God, was that 60 or 70 clients? And I think when she said that to me, I said to myself, I actually must have done something right in that situation, gave her the time that she deserved going through that prep. But yeah, that's definitely relatable that you said that. That brought a good memory back in.
Yeah, and it's something that like we got to practice as well. And I think that comes with, like, yes, structure and stuff is important, but if a client has a check-in, like if clients checking in, they're after having a shit week, you give them more time.
Oh yeah.
It would, like, yeah, we might want to get through X amount of check-ins today, but if I need to stay up a little bit later to get through other people because somebody needs more of my time, the best believe they're getting it. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And again, that in itself can't be taught unless you've experienced it yourself, because you would have learned it through Brian. You would experience it through Brian when you had those days and going through those times. I had it through my coaches. as well. And that's what instilled it into us. But I say to so many people, junior coaches, you know, what you take in the first year, 2 years of your coaching career molds you for what you're going to do in 5 years and 10 years. And I think there's always a substantial difference in the caliber of coach you become and the person that you become and how relatable you can be and empathetic you can be by the environments you surround yourself in the first 24 months of coaching. You know, like you said, surrounding yourself with mentors, being in environments that force you to level up. And I think there's so much to be said for like big chain gyms, but big chain gyms do not put you in that environment because you're kind of left to fend for yourself. And when you're left to fend for yourself, you know, one of my favorite sayings of all time is you don't know what you don't know. And learning empathy, it's very difficult to learn that if you're not either being coached by someone, mentored by someone, or just being in that environment. When I started off, I worked under Brian Hickey and Gary Downey, and there was probably 4 or 5 other coaches. Aaron Smith played a very big role in kind of helping me, mentor me in my very first kind of early stages of my career. But it was those people who were phenomenal at the time, you know, really good coaches at the time, but they kind of drilled those core concepts into me at an early age. And everything after that, all the other education aspects after that kind of follow suit. But I think those are the key concepts you need to grasp when you're only getting in the door, getting your foot in the door.
On the path is what we call it.
Path, yes. So what are we going to chat about today, my friends?
We're going to do some female physiology stuff, some birth control stuff, and
yes,
some all that, I suppose.
Do you know what? I'm actually really, really looking forward to this because we obviously ran numerous webinars and chats about this topic before, but it's something that I think just needs to be continually brought up. You know, when we were speaking earlier on and we said, you know, we're going to touch on a lot of things that we touched on those webinars, but you said yourself, even if those people were attending, they need to be brought through it again. And it's just something that you can never take your foot off the gas with, because if you take your foot off the pedal for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, everything becomes a little bit unknown again. And as coaches, we can't afford to take our foot off the gas at this topic. We deal with, God, so many females at once inside our business. And I think one thing that we definitely pride ourselves on is the approach that we take towards our female clients regarding a lot of what we're going to talk about today is birth control, but not only birth control, but just general physiology and how we coach them around their cycle and the considerations that we bring into it. What I actually want to do first is kind of maybe give a little bit of a background of why, when you first started studying this topic, what was it that sparked the interest for you?
I'm going to relate that to like every single thing that I study, because I have clients that I need to know for. Some things I'm not going, like, I need to understand this, even if it's not going to change anything that I do as a coach. I just need to get it so I understand. So I can offer a service that I'm proud of, I suppose. And like I coach females. This is one of the big things that, like, there's a lot of misconceptions around it. So like, let me go tease them out. Let me see if they're real. Let me see what we can do about it. That is probably being where it's stemmed from. How about yourself?
I think for myself, it was awareness, seeing other coaches brush over the topic. And we see it so much online now, but I saw it a lot in a gym that I was working in, females coming in. I'm on my period this week, and the coach getting a deer in the headlights effect to say, I don't know what to say to that, so we're just going to brush past it, you know, becoming accepting of massive scale weight increases, becoming accepting of this and that, but not having an answer, not having a solution to the problem. And to me, I always felt like that was like a bit of a red flag. And I always remember hearing those things and seeing those things, and then seeing it online as well. And just one day, just something triggered with me. And I said to myself, do you know what? I need to learn more about this. So I actually reached out to Aisling from AOK Nutrition and done like a lot of private consultations with her, and she came out to a gym that we were working in. And Aisling, God, deals with a lot of our clients now, probably 30-40% of our clients who just general issues or problems that they may have. And she would be kind of my go-to in that sense, but she taught me so much. But just kind of in a sense, like what you'll do with all these people that you meet, they just open the door for you and push you in the right direction. And then it's on yourself to kind of dive deeper down that rabbit hole. But for myself, it was just the awareness of too many people just becoming too many people being unknown of the situation, but then nearly thinking as well, is it a kind of the gap in the market to think, okay, well, if I upskilled myself around that, as I was starting to deal with a lot more females and kind of getting that little bit of a reputation for, you know, dealing with females. Okay, if you can be great with females, learn how to do transformations, fantastic, learn how to train them properly, learn the culture and training aspect. But if you can, I always thought to myself, if you can master this is going to offer something that nobody else can offer. And that kind of opened up the rabbit hole for me. And then obviously speaking with Ash, dealing with her on a one-to-one basis, then that's when my interest just grew and my love for it just kind of grew. And, you know, when you hear people that are so passionate talking about a subject, you know, it just sparks it in you then as well. And hearing how passionate Ash is about this subject, and, you know, how, I suppose, maybe how passionate she was teaching myself, obviously being a male coach, probably a little bit unknown, but I think passion creates passion, and that just spiraled it for me, you know, opened up the door for me.
Very good. Really. I must do it. It's on the list of things to do. I must book in for some consults with her. Even
practical application, dude. She has it nailed. Her mum was a midwife and then became a nutritionist and a nutritionist and a homeopath. And then that's how Aisling obviously stemmed. But Aisling's brothers own Nutritics. So there's like a family of
very good.
Yeah. So the whole family. But I think the fact that her mum was a nutritionist obviously opened up that whole pathway. But yeah, she's absolutely fantastic at what she does and cares about clients a lot. So right, why don't we open this up by just, obviously, before we go to birth control, I think it'd be nice to just run through just a bit of an overview from a physiology standpoint. So do you want to kind of take the reins on this and just run through what we need to understand before we start talking about things?
Yeah, so I suppose I've been speaking a little bit too much about the hypothalamus lately, but I'm gonna do it again. So we have, again, I'm just going to let's try sum this up in kind of 3 minutes or so. So we have our like a normal menstrual function, menstrual cycle. There is no such thing as normal. Like 28 days is what I'm going to use for simplicity, but it can be anywhere between like 24 and 35 days. I think like for it to be termed oligomenorrhea, which is I believe it's like upwards of 40, like past 45 days. And then obviously like amenorrhea is a lack of a period for a 12-week block. So we look at our two predominant hormones. So we have two predominant phases and two predominant hormones. So we have the follicular phase, which is the first phase. So that would be starting on day 1 of our menstrual bleed. And then 14 days after that, we have ovulation. And then we have our luteal phase. So we're estrogen dominant in our follicular phase and progesterone dominant in our luteal phase. And so like there is some kind of like differences that we're going to see in terms of like, if I'm completely honest, I worry about this less now than I did 2 years ago. And the reason being is there's so much inter-individuality between individuals that for us to even try and say that we're going to program around somebody's menstrual cycle is extremely difficult. And maybe we can after like working with somebody for like 16 weeks.
Yeah.
But like I can't have somebody come in the door and be like, okay, we're gonna base your program and your nutrition around your menstrual cycle, because it's just, yeah, I could pretend to, I'd probably sound cool, but like no, the minute difference that we're going to get from um like fluctuating carbs and stuff. No, not something that I will do. Bar the only person I will do it with is if people are absolute robots. So, for example, Lucia, my girlfriend who I coach, she's probably the only person that I would have like fluctuations, where I would like in the luteal phase, like maybe pull fat up a little touch, try make a benefit of the increase in basal metabolic rate. But everybody else is just like, okay, what are we going to see around a menstrual cycle that we need to worry about? And the main thing is just appetite and adherence. And we spoke about that in depth this time last week, so I'm not going to touch on that now. But like we need the main thing that I'm looking at is just like, okay, right, that is what I'm worried about. I'm worried about adherence falling off track. So maybe I will decrease the deficit on the week of a female's period for that reason alone, not because I'm trying to kind of match the metabolic demands. Yes, like I see means for it. Like I see means for it in some people, but nah, not something that I personally do anymore. Yeah. Actually, there's a good couple of things that I just didn't touch on there.
I was gonna say, you talked about a lot, but you missed out on one or two key concepts as well.
Yeah. So we're just like looking at what are you saying that I missed out on?
FSH, LH.
Oh yeah,
they're gonna come up an awful lot.
Okay, yeah. Sorry. So we have our follicular stimulating hormone, which is going to drive estrogen production. And then we have our luteinizing hormone. So we have an LH surge, which drives ovulation. Now, the feedback mechanism driving this LH surge could be down to the winning follicle driving up estrogen, or I believe that is the mechanism driving it, driving the LH surge. But this kind of like the feedback loops that we see here, with the fluctuations in LH in particular is relatively unknown. But just on like what exactly is happening with ovulation. So we see, we have these kind of like these proteolytic enzymes that are going to break down. So it's going to break down. We're going to see ovulation, and then we will see after estrogen is produced and we see ovulation, then we will see this corpus luteum being produced, and this is where we will see our progesterone being produced. Yeah, I approached that wrong, but we got to it.
No, let's roll. And you know what? They're just the concepts of what we need, and just so that people have an understanding. Because when we start kind of just discussing birth control as just a general topic and just giving our opinions and advice on what's the right way to go about things and the wrong way, but when we're kind of breaking them down, people will need to understand those concepts, because they're like we say all the time, they may be simple for us, but for other people they might just not know what they are. And that's what we're gonna really try to do today, is just try to keep it as easy to understand as possible. Because like we said, when we first started off listening to this, there's ways we can go about this that can just kind of complicate, and there's ways we can go about it where you can just understand one thing and you're like, yeah, I actually kind of understand that's pretty cool, let me learn something else, and then we'll hopefully be that little stepping stone. So
need sorry for cutting across you there, but I think it's a lot easier to look at this if we have a diagram in front of us.
Yeah.
So
listen to it on a podcast will be quite tough.
yeah. I suppose maybe a lot of people, all they need is that extra bit of repetition, so because they've seen this a couple of times, so in that circumstance it could be beneficial.
Like we said, we've broken it down numerous times now on our lockdown lives and on the webinars that we've done, but this is just going to open up again that little bit of a refresher. So what are we going to dive into next, Steve? What do we have next on the agenda?
So you're going to give me a rundown of the different types of birth controls and the effects that they're going to have on body composition.
Yeah, so I think when we look at birth control, it is a very, very large topic to cover, but a topic that also contains a lot of similarities and a lot of commonalities as well. So as coaches, I think it's always good just to have a baseline understanding. And when we look at it from a compositional perspective, each one of these individual birth controls / hormone controls will play some sort of a role in body comp. So when we look at just kind of like a general overview, first, so the kind of opportunity that birth control has, we can look at it from many different ways. We can look at it from a local perspective, which we can look at things like the coil and the patch. Look, obviously, condoms as a form of contraceptive. Then we look at hormones. Now, hormones are a little bit more tricky to kind of understand and get our mindset around. So as Dee spoke about earlier on, the key kind of ovarian hormones that we're going to look to identify today would be estrogen and progesterone. They can be manipulated in the system from synthetic formats. So what we'll kind of do first is just kind of give a bit of an overview of kind of what I know it sounds kind of crazy what birth control can be used for, but just to kind of give a bit of a breakdown. So obviously it's used for contraceptive purposes, but also can be used to treat medical conditions as well. So one of the big questions that I will always ask when I'm discussing this consultation or throughout coaching, if a client is ever changing or using a new form, is the reason as to why. And I don't think you should ever be afraid to ask that reason why. Sometimes the response that you may get may throw you off course a little bit, but this is when we can kind of look at learning a little bit more about these topics. So when we're looking at it from a medical standpoint, and there's going to be ways and means of controlling certain imbalances throughout forms of birth control. And again, I think I think it's the Lloyd McDonald Volume 2, he always makes the reference of birth control as hormone control. And I think at times it's always nice to use that reference, because not always is it for contraceptive purposes. Sometimes it is for hormone control as well. So when you're looking at certain conditions, they can be caused by imbalances in hormones. And I think for myself, do I fully agree with that? Not necessarily, because I truthfully do believe at times that it's better to fix a problem than it is to potentially mask a problem. And sometimes when you look at that level of hormone control, could you argue the fact that you are putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound, in the sense of you're not really fixing anything, you're just short-term fixing the problem? So whenever we look at those symptoms, like a lot of PCOS patients will look at forms of hormone control to regulate cycle function. Again, a lot of that will be progesterone dominant and birth control. But you have to always ask the question of why is that level of PCOS? Why is that testosterone level high? Ask the question of why. Now, do I think that it's in our power as coaches to start fixing those problems? Potentially not. But it's always good to recommend to your client, because at the end of the day, if you recommend for your client who was at a GP to maybe go and speak to a gynecologist, endocrinologist, somebody who will be able to start the process of fixing the problem. And when we spoke about Aisling from AOK Nutrition, Aisling is that one of those go-tos who has a lot of our clients who have had PCOS in the past, and they were put on a form of birth control. And I didn't agree with that form of birth control. I thought it wasn't the right health choice to make for them from a longevity standpoint, from a fertility standpoint, because we know that some forms of birth control may actually hinder chance of fertility long-term. Is that the right choice to make? Maybe a short-term fix, but think about long-term repercussions. So in patients like PCOS, I do feel like potential hormone control may not be the best thing to do. When we look at also birth control is used to treat PMS, which again, is it masking an issue or is it fixing an issue? Could potentially be masking dysmenorrhea, very painful periods. It's used to control the cycle. So again, probably not something that I recommend to do, but a lot of athletes will use birth control to control their cycle, because we know kind of maybe week 2 or maybe the latter phase of the cycle, they may feel more comfortable to be able to perform at a high level. There may be benefits from performing at a higher level away from that week of menstruation, so it can also be used for that. And like we said, some small things, like not small things in a sense, but some skin issues. A lot of young females are put on birth control or hormone control for acne and skincare, which is kind of crazy when you really think about that they're put on that form, which we'll go through obviously the kind of side effects and stuff.
Yeah. So I just think like just from the one thing that like I will have a problem with is just like when we're using it as a means of like regulating your period, when you're not doing that, you're completely shutting down endogenous function. It's the same as like a male taking anabolic steroids. You're completely shutting off endogenous function. So it's not like this pill is helping me plan my exactly where my period is going to be, but it's planning it for me because it is my period. So that withdrawal bleed that we get, the only reason we have there is a withdrawal bleed program is because females were getting excited because they thought they were pregnant. So it like that means nothing. We've completely shut down endogenous function. And that's just like, that's probably the only thing that I will pull up with clients, is just like, hey, okay, so this is fine, like this is okay, but we this isn't regulating your period. It's completely shut it off.
And there is, and this is a complete different topic, but there is a humongous difference between a period and a withdrawal bleed. They are not the same thing. And when things like combination pill, combined pill, even some of the progestin onlys, they're utilized to regulate, like you said, to regulate the regulate a period. A period endometrial lining shedding. It's starting to, release that corpus luteum, starting to get that whole build up to ovulation, preparing for birth or conception. But then when you look at withdrawal bleed, basically a drop in synthetic hormones that triggers some blood and mucus to be shed from the lining. It's not the same thing. They're miles apart. But what kind of gets me as well, it's just misinformation that's out there, and so many females just don't understand that. They wouldn't understand the differential between a withdrawal bleed and an actual period, which is kind of scary to think.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, I just while we're on the topic of the pill, we may as well run through the pill. So, one of the most common is the combined pill. Combined pill contains synthetic forms of estrogen and progesterone, which will be progestin. It will be noted down as, and it's many different methodologies of use. 21/7 is a very common approach. 24/4, 25/3, or 26/2 are the most common. But the one thing I think we need to look at in the sense of this form of contraceptive is temporary form of contraceptive, because it's very, very short acting. And a lot of us would have seen this before. Female clients missed their pill for one day and they'll get a withdrawal bleed the next day. So that's how quick and easy into the system it is. And the one thing that I don't agree with, well, there's probably a lot of things that I don't agree with this form of contraceptive, but the one thing I don't agree with is you're relying on a young girl's consistency for birth control. Take it at the same time every day. Life gets in the way. People miss days. People forget to do things. So for me, when we're looking at it from a temporary perspective, there's many different ways we can look at that. But I personally don't agree with the method of how it's taken. Just from a perspective of consistency reliance, I don't agree with that. As you said earlier on, the withdrawal bleed is just to basically make people feel normal again, with no scientific or psychological reason behind it. There's nothing backing a withdrawal bleed that I could deem a responsible thing to be able to undergo. I personally feel that consecutive use is a much safer approach than actually having a break, just on the bias that there's no reasoning or rationale as to take a 7-day break. Now, I do feel, though, potentially giving a week break may help regulate some sort of natural estrogen and progesterone levels again. It will definitely help with that consistency in the negative feedback loop, which we're going to speak about now in a moment. But that's the only thing that I would deem I would deem a rationale to take it. And coming into now, a lot of the later forms that were produced contain much more bioidentical forms of estrogen. So we're going to talk a little bit later on about the synthetic forms of estrogen and the negative implications that they can have on sex hormone binding globulin and what it can have on thyroid function. But the more bioidentical seem to be a little bit safer. It does seem to be progressing, considering that these forms of contraceptive were created in 1970, which is kind of fucking crazy to think that they're still in use today. But I think what we'll kind of touch on now is that negative feedback loop. Do you want to run through that negative feedback loop?
Yeah. So what we are going to see is, and this is kind of like something that we touched on already. But what we're going to see is there's actually, I will try tie some stress in here as well. Actually, I think that will be a good plan, because there's lots of stuff that we can tie in to this that is going to drive down. So something that I missed completely as well is just like what exactly this Hpa axis is, or the Hpo axis is actually what we're looking at here, but the stress physiology side of things is the Hpa axis. So what we're going to see with this Hpo axis is, what we can see is like cortisol can cross the blood-brain barrier at like certain places, and it will be able to negatively influence follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. The next thing that we see with kind of like negative, some things that are going to regulate negative feedback will be energy availability. So when we look at, if you are somebody who is consistently in a low energy availability state, which means like, so what we have to do is we find your expenditure, your intake, and then there's a little calculation. I'm actually not 100% sure what the calculation is, but you find that it has to be like, so low energy availability is below like 40 calories per kilogram or something. I can't exactly remember exactly what it is, but what it gives us is basically looking at this as a broad overview. If we're consistently in a state where we're underfeeding ourselves for long periods of time, we're going to see this along with stress is going to be probably the main drivers of this hypothalamic amenorrhea. So the complete shutdown of menstrual function. And this is something like, it's really, really important as coaches to get that. It's like, that's something that we have control over. It's just like, if this fat loss phase isn't working and we're like spending a lot of time in a deficit, and I don't know, somebody has excessive stress coming in from college or whatever it is, it's just like the opportunity for loss of menstrual function and the shit show of implications that come with prolonged low energy availability, so decrease in bone mineral density, stuff like that that we don't want to see. And even like if we're completely shutting down the HPO axis, we're going to see decreases in estrogen and all of the benefits that we get from estrogen. And this is something as coaches that we can control. And this is why we'll be so adamant of our stress management and so adamant of maybe things like diet breaks and stuff and little things like that, like spending, not being consistently dieting, I think is the best way of looking at it. Like, don't be a person who is always dieting. If you're just Gen Pop who's trying to lose some weight, do it once and then maintain and strength train and all that good stuff. But you know what I mean? Just get it done. Do you have a good bit to add there, do you?
Yeah, no, that was pretty spot on, to be fair. It was yeah, spot on, perfect. Not too much. So yeah, basically, you know, as you said, we're just looking to have that negative feedback loop kind of roll in, and the effect that will have then on that natural hormone pathway. As we're looking at that feedback loop, in a sense, the one thing that I think is always kind of just important to just know as coaches is, and it's just a very simple kind of take home or kind of simple aspect to look at it. When there's more synthetic hormone, it will just override the natural hormone level, and that's essentially what birth control will do. It's the same kind of super physiological effect if a male took testosterone. It would just basically shut down his natural testosterone pathway. And it's just important to understand that on a very, very basic level when you're talking about that form of birth control. So what we'll just kind of run through very, very, very briefly.
I took that question my own way, didn't I?
What?
I took that question my own way.
I liked where you went, but that's what I was trying to touch on. All right. Well, I'm just going to touch on very, very quickly. Just synthetic estrogen and the effects that it can have on the body before we go into Marina Coil and some of the much longer acting progesterone. So estrogen is normal levels of estrogen. Free-flowing estrogen is a very, very good hormone to have. It can really boost libido function. It can play a massive role from a strength training perspective. It can boost fat metabolism. We're talking about a female who doesn't have any form of hormonal control in place. You know, you could kind of say that the first two kind of weeks of the cycle are a pretty solid week from a training and fat loss perspective. But when we do start to bring in those synthetic, especially the older generation forms of estrogen, it does start to have a little bit of a red flag effect, I would say. So when it's broken into the body, especially from that combination pill, it's metabolized within the liver and can actually affect liver function. So when liver function increases, kind of toxicity in the liver increases, it also can increase the effect of thyroid binding globulin. So what we always want to understand, just a very simple understanding of it, going into too much detail. When we look at binding globulin, think about your hormones binding towards kind of glycoprotein. So every time we have a thyroid hormone, it binds to glycoprotein. We have an estrogen, it binds. We have any androgens, it binds. Testosterone, it binds. Progestin binds. But the more that binds to the protein, the less free flowing we have, or less kind of availability to get a benefit out of those hormone levels as they then decrease. So that's essentially what synthetic estrogen can do. It can hugely go against thyroid function. But again, when we look at thyroid function, any of the negative implications of down regulating thyroid, which we should definitely do an episode on. But from a body composition perspective, it can be very, very bad. It wouldn't necessarily go too for us in a sense of trying to manipulate body comp whilst having a shutdown thyroid function. But like I said, the sex hormone binding globulin basically bind sex hormones to that to that androgen receptor or to the actual sex hormones themselves, so estrogen, progesterone, and can also kind of manipulate cortisol, which is probably not a bad thing. But as sex hormones kind of bind together, they'll also then decrease the functionality of luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone as well. When we look at the one thing, again, we're just kind of speaking about from a body composition perspective, but when we're looking at synthetic estrogen, it can play a very big role in shutting down natural free-flowing testosterone levels in females. So a female's testosterone level, natural testosterone level, could be anywhere from 1/15 of a male's. So if you're bringing that down by an additional 50%, it's a massive chunk to take away. And when we look at any of the benefits testosterone can have on muscle building, changing body composition, we would like to try to keep that as safe as possible. And I think this can always be one of the arguments for progesterone only. Now, again, as coaches, something you may argue the fact of, and look, if you ever have coaches, if you have clients who are looking to take their body composition to that extreme level, they're looking to build an awful lot of muscle mass, they want to take it very, very seriously. They want to go to that elite level. Every percentage counts. And if you're looking to build muscle, every percentage counts. And if you could have an opportunity to take a synthetic form of estrogen or to run a potential progestin only, there's obviously going to be negative implications as well from a progestin, but we're just trying to essentially open your eyes up to, yes, there are some benefits, but yes, there also are a lot more negatives that may come from it as well. So that will be just kind of like a bit of an overview of those synthetic estrogens and what effect that they may have on the body and what effects they may have on body composition as well. So, we'll look at the more local form. So the Marina coil and the copper coil are probably the two most common that we will see. The copper coil is a hormone-free form of contraceptive. It basically just creates a very, what we would call, hostile environment for sperm. Sperm is actually allergic, like it gets rejected against copper. That's essentially how the copper coil works. It's very, very simple. It's just placed into the vagina, and obviously we just rejected sperm. The Marina plays a little bit of a different role. It does release local progestin, so it releases the hormone in that specific area, and more or less plays the same role. Creates a very hostile environment for sperm to set in. It can also thicken the mucus that can be found inside the uterus, and that in a sense can also prevent sperm from entering into the mucus. The one thing that I like to keep in my considerations all the time when dealing with female clients, if a client ever wanted to try to regulate her cycle more frequently, I probably wouldn't go down the road of a Marina coil, to the simple fact that it has been shown to make cycles more irregular. Is that what's the word I'm looking for? Irregular. The cycle function, more or less. It can make your cycle more irregular, basically. So I wouldn't be taking it. I wouldn't be using it as a form of contraceptive to try to regulate cycle function, as it has the opposing effects. The good thing that the benefit that I like from the Marina coil, it still keeps natural free-flowing estrogen. It doesn't create too much of a negative feedback loop that it's going to shut off natural progestin levels. You still have your luteinizing hormone. You still have your follicle stimulating hormone. And this would be a much longer acting form of contraceptive. So you'd be looking at most coils are in from anywhere from a 3 to 5 year period. So you'd be looking from more of a longer perspective. But from a composition standpoint, I don't think that it would make a massive difference here nor there. I do feel like potentially arguing the fact that you'll have more free-flowing hormone levels, more free-flowing estrogen shouldn't affect your natural free-flowing testosterone levels. So if you're looking at that versus like an estrogen only, or we're going to talk about now in a second, long-acting progestin, probably maybe a bit of a better option. When you're talking about this versus maybe like a pill or going completely natural, probably you're clutching at straws to find a difference. Is there anything you wanted to add into that, Dee?
Not that you're probably going to touch on now in a second.
Okay, so we're going to roll on to the last one, which is a favorite of ours, the depot shot. The depot shot I find very, very difficult to find a benefit from. I really do. I don't agree with it. I don't think that it has any benefits bar sheer convenience. It's kind of that middle of the ground. It can last for up to 3 months. But we'll run through now kind of the effects it has on the body and what it does. So as we spoke about before, if you're a combination pill, which is a combination of the both estrogen and progestin, you have your Coil, which is a local form of progestin, but then you have the depot shot, which is a very long acting form of first generation progesterone, which basically just means it's a very high concentration. So when you look at the generations, the first generations are usually always very high in concentration, and as the generations go down, they kind of drop off in their concentration levels. There's a lot of negative impacts that can come from this, but the number one thing is the weight gain that's affiliated with the depot shot. It will be unknown for females to have a 7 pound increase, 7 to 10 pound increase from taking the depot shot. And this depot shot manipulates many different things. It can hugely increase psychological awareness of more calorically dense foods. It can have a massive impact on bone mineral density. It can hugely upregulate alpha-2 receptor, which tells the body to store fat for later use. So when you think about from a fat loss perspective, you want to be telling the body to stop storing fat for later use. And this can really tell the body to store fat for later use. And it can have a huge impact on cortisol receptor, natural free-flowing testosterone. It can have a huge impact on water retention by shutting down the ADH, which is the anti-diuretic hormone. And like I said, in my opinion, the only real benefit from it is just the sheer convenience. I'm not going to say an unsafe thing to use, but I don't think that it has too many benefits that I can name off the top of my head. So when we're looking at it from a body composition perspective, it's probably one of the worst to be on. And I personally do believe that if you had the correct skill set, you could argue the fact to a client that if they wanted to really improve their physique and take their physique and their health to the next level, that it's probably not the best option to take.
Yeah, and with like the fourth generation progesterone, we do see like I think it is the biggest reduction in testosterone as well, which is not necessarily something that we want.
Not at all. And I think for a lot of us, we definitely underestimate the application of testosterone in females and how big of an impact it actually has in female training, female body composition. It plays a huge role. So what we'll do now is just kind of have a little bit of an overview, more or less, of everything that we have just ran through. So obviously at the start, we kind of just overviewed the ovarian hormone. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on there, Dee, in regards to birth control?
Nothing in particular, bar like there seems to be, in some people, it's going to have negative effects on your well-being. Now it has shown to have positive effects in other people's well-being as well, but maybe maybe you are in one of either group. So what we will see is progesterone is going to be like a precursor for GABA, which is the calming neurotransmitter. So it is the opposite of glutamate. And with the synthetic progestins, we're going to see it by, like, let's say we're using the key, the lock and key example. It's not going to be able to produce GABA, and we will see decreased GABA and potentially decreased calming effects in some individuals. Yeah. Which is very, very interesting. And I do believe, again, I think it is the book, Your Brain on Birth Control. Now, I haven't read the research, but she speaks about like increased rate of suicide in teens with birth control, which is like interesting. Again, I haven't looked into it myself, so I can't say anything more. I will get you the name of that author now.
Interesting, but at the same time, I think that should just open up your thought process to, even if that statement is mildly true, it's a very, very big impact to have. But there's always going to be psychological repercussions when hormones are brought into the equation. You know, there always is going to be. There's going to be some form of drawback or some form of decrease. Do you find the name of the book?
Yeah, so it's Sarah E. Hill, and it is This Is Your Brain on Birth Control.
Okay, fantastic. Anything else you want to spar into that book?
So I have a couple of cool book recommendations. So the fifth vital sign, the period repair manual, of course, Lyle McDonald's both books, except they are like, that is a bit, they're pretty hard to get through, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think first one was great, but the second one is probably a little bit more advanced.
Yeah. It's definitely heavier. But even the first one, I found like I can usually get through a book in about like 10 hours or so. That women's book took me like I'd say about 40. I hated it by the time I was finished it.
Yeah.
and so the fifth vital sign, period repair manual, This Is Your Brain on Birth Control, Lyle McDonald's books, and then Beyond the Pill are books that I've kind of pulled references from, or pulled some sort of knowledge from as well. And then like from a looking at physiology side of things, Ninja something or other. If you just, it will come up on YouTube if you look up Ninja Academy or something like that. Fantastic for all things physiology. So you can get a pretty cool insight into just like, it's not because it's not body composition related at all. It's just like, okay, this is exactly what's happening with ovarian hormones, and this is the effect that it's having on everything. It like he goes into like pretty good detail. You'll have a pretty good understanding after watching that video a couple of times.
Awesome, bud. Yeah, I think that's it. Like I said, we'll just run through a very, very quick overview of what we just kind of spoke about. So I think the number one thing that, you know, we spoke about today, and everything needs to be taken in just sheer anecdotal response. You know, we're just trying to open up eyes as coaches as we need to what our clients are potentially putting in their body, or already have in their body, or have taken in the past, or are currently on at the moment, and just to open up to kind of see what effects they are having on the body. Because like I said, for myself, the big thing for me was being that person that understood And I wanted to be that person who, if somebody was speaking about birth control, I had a baseline understanding about, and even having that understanding can really help you out an awful lot. So if I was to kind of give some just overall advice, it would be only ever make a recommendation if you really feel like you're putting your client's health at the forefront and you think that the recommendation you're about to make is going to improve their health. I don't think, because it can be a very, very touchy subject, to ever make a recommendation otherwise. And if there was ever any form of, previous history regarding the issue, it can be a very touchy subject for the client. So just kind of tread on the toes a little bit. If you may think, look, sometimes we don't agree with the depot shot and it's fucking terrible. But if that was the only resolution for somebody for whatever reason, it's just, it wouldn't be the right choice to make those recommendations, as they do kind of play close to heart. But other than that, if you always keep your clients' health at the forefront, and you should be able to make a very good recommendation to go and speak to somebody else about trying to take a more alternative route. And I think, there's a lot of things that we could definitely dive into later on, but for me, myself personally, I think taking the most natural route as possible, and in regards to solving any problems that may be there. Like we said earlier on, I think any medication around that topic may be looking at masking issues that we need to be resolving from the root cause. And look, always respect your clients. Always respect your client's decision. Look, there may be times when they're doing things that we don't necessarily want them to do, and if we advise and they still continue to do so, we just have to always respect their decision.
Yeah, I think, like, even in some circumstances where, like, let's say, for example, somebody is taking the Depo-Vera, it's like, okay, maybe pointing them in the right direction, finding out the information for themselves. So, like, maybe just giving them a book recommendation or something like that might be a good option. And yeah, I think that I did that a couple of times, because I don't like to turn around and be like, okay, well, this is what's going on here. Sometimes
scared them.
Yeah, sometimes that's not helpful either. Like, especially when we can look at, like, everything else. Let's get your training. Let's get your sleep and your stress in a good spot, and body composition in 97% of the population will be improved by that alone.
Exactly. It will indeed. Right. Will we wrap up there?
We will indeed.
All right. Thanks very much, guys. Really appreciated that.